Thanks all the nerds to come along. Thanks Google for hosting us and everything. Yeah, what we're going to talk about is some of the learnings from working on something quite obscure in cypherpunk and out there. Some things are already like quite advanced, and some other stuff are in really early exploratory stage. So some of the concepts behind SpaceCoin is that over the last years, there's been finally a renewed interest in the space industry and orbital data center thing. So we'll cover just like why is this an interesting thing. Generally, putting things out there in orbit or out of the planet means that it's tamper-proof and it's hardened infrastructure in that regard. And some of the protocol-related design choices that we made are very interesting. So we'll get to cover that a bit. Everything else here outlined. So yeah, maybe yangwao.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So for why actually now is because like the all orbital data centers actually skyrocketing, and the price for the launch is actually much lower. So why is actually the rationale behind the launching these on the satellites is that there was like recent also the study that the current data centers are energy efficient, and there's actually much better opportunities on the orbit. So actually have like reduced the cooling costs, then the access of the solar power, which is like technically the 24/7, and then actually you don't need to like the need for the water cooling, and the potentially like you can have like the lower latencies in the future when you have like the more units. So on the right you can that you can see like in the past decade there are actually much more launches in the last 6 decades. That was like now in the recent years. And the price per kilogram actually can reach as like the $10 per kilogram. So I think in 10 years it could be interesting era.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess there's a few interesting things about what we're trying to build. Some are applicable quite immediately, and some are a bit more future focused. Generally speaking, the way that we're viewing the satellite network is as a celestial compute marketplace. So right now there's use cases that are relevant for Earth, but in the future, as the increase in launches is basically exponentially growing, we're foreseeing a scenario where there's going to be a lot of space native economy. And essentially, yeah, we have Earth as kind of base camp, if you wish, and then eventually orbit and extraplanetary environment that is filled with service consumers and other service providers. And what we have is smart contract capabilities that will be launched on top of the L1, and then essentially like bridges or AVSs and things like this that connect between the celestial L1 and Earth. Eventually, like you can look at what SpaceCoin will be is if you connect to, let's say, Ethereum via some RPC, you'll have equivalently like an RPC to connect to space. Yeah, interesting fact is the tamper-proofability of the infrastructure. So in about last 3 years, we've experimented with a number of different satellites with different communication modules. The latest one that was launched with our aerospace partner, CryptoSat, renamed Aptos Orbital, is equipped with the Iridium antenna, which essentially allows us to connect to the satellite, not just when there is a visibility window, because it's the same technology that satellites phones are based on. I think this month or early next month, we'll be starting to launch a new series of satellites called Sea Edge. And those are already all equipped with the Iridium antennas, and potentially future generations will be equipped with even better communication modules. So that gives the immunity for traditional side channel attacks and all kind of other properties. The way that we can reach the network is, I think, like 30-ish seconds to be like having for sure a read and download, like a write and download. And all that is kind of the hardware that we're relying on, and is quite challenging to design for when you think about competing with something like Solana or Mega ETH or stuff like that. So we'll get to how do we actually solve it when these are the latencies. Yeah, so the kind of network architecture that we we're conceptualizing in the recently published blue paper we worked on with Professor Dalia Malki from UC Santa Barbara. What we're proposing there and what we're now starting to specify as a protocol is a L1 in space, which is essentially the celestial component, can have high latency, can have constrained bandwidth, but obviously is much more resilient to any attacks. And then on Earth, we're essentially using the uncelestial committee, the uncelestial component, as L2 that actually we did find a mechanism to give pretty robust security guarantees. And yeah, we'll get to a little bit more of it if we'll have enough time here. I don't have a timer, but please signal for me. 5 more minutes, okay, cool.
Is Marcus heard here? Yeah,
Okay. So yeah, we basically chose the hot stuff one. It's I think hotshot, espresso hotshot is one of the candidates we're looking. Streamlined consensus, linear communication, and elastic leader selection. And the reason is that when you're communicating with the satellite is you have certain satellites that are in blind spots. So then you cannot allow for something like a heavy gossip protocol like Tendermint or otherwise, the things that require a lot of communication. And in space, we kind of need to account for that. So we only require connectivity to one single leader. And this is the flow of how we reach the consensus on layer 1. We basically have two scenarios here of visibility. You have messages that essentially first reach only satellite 1 and 2 in this example, eventually through the voting cycle go through all the rest of them, and by the third stage you have full consensus on the entire network. So it's quite reasonable assumptions. And going back to the L2, which is the Earth component. The L2, we're proposing a mechanism. There's like a number of different methods, but we're proposing a mechanism that will give us fast pre-finality. So it basically gives you the pre-finality on Earth, and then eventually submits to space and gives you the final finality, if you wish. And then in terms of how to actually incorporate it, one of the methods to do it is with the proposal we have here. Another one is to use any of the commit chains or AVSs and things that are kind of, wouldn't say off the shelf, but existing already today. And yeah, eventually, as I mentioned earlier, the full finality is on L1, the celestial one. And Mate?
Okay, thank you. So another things actually after this, we can like offering some the security services within the satellite network. So one of the things we're actually thinking like is the TEE is actually the coprocessor. It enables like the potential doing some FAG once we actually get the access to more broad the bandwidth, as the space computation is actually already sort of abundant these days. And then we can like build the apps like the secure custodians. Actually, you can like store the keys in some MPC scheme, which is leveraging our current consensus from the finality and the stuff. Then we can have like the providing some C, TRNG on through our satellites, because we have like better exposure for the radiation from the sun. So we call it like the cosmic entropy. It can be like plenty useful on the applications down here on the Earth. And then with another creative use cases we can use like the secure deletion with the physical guarantees that as we are delete some things on the satellites, technically is like nobody can reach it afterwards, because like it's physically untouchable. And then of course like the bulletin board capabilities, because like once we launch the satellites, it's they're immutable for their life cycle, which could be like some only like 5 to 7 years, or maybe on the geo even much longer. So yeah.
Just a word on the internal bulletin board. So essentially here is, if you have a network, even like Bitcoin, that eventually when the fees go down, so a state level actor can go and attack it. But if you have that bulletin board as a backup, you're safeguarding Bitcoin forever, because you take a periodic snapshot. So that's one of the very cool features of Spacecoin.
Oh yeah, and that's as we are running short on time. So we actually plan is the support having the compatibility even with the EVM or the SVM, of course. And then we'll be like having looking for the deployments for the bridge contracts and the future extensible on the WASM and the risk based VMs. And yeah, and pretty much that's it. So you can keep us a follow. We are always like looking for the L1, L2 foundations, the wallets, validators, and the entropy providers, so we can like work with them and provide some of the entropy that would be like earliest. So okay, thank you for your attention.